The time has come for the Cobra to rise up and reveal himself.
So now, let's take a look at the money multiplier, whose formula is 1 divided by the required reserve ratio. But before we take a look at how the formula, the math of the formula, let's take a look at how this would theoretically play out, and then how the formula would kick in. So, in our previous example, we deposited $1,000 into Bank A, and that $1,000 was broken up into $100 that must go to required reserves if it's a deposit, and must go to required reserves, and the remaining $900 could go to excess reserves. Somebody came to the bank and asked the bank for a loan, and the bank said indeed, and so the bank took that $900, and that $900, now there's $0 in excess reserves, and that $900 now became a loan. And they gave that loan to a person who then went to a store, fantastic, and bought something with it, and now that store has the $900, and this person must eventually pay the bank back that $900 with interest. What's the store going to do? It's going to deposit that $900 into a bank account. And let's say that store has a bank account in Bank B. So the store deposits the $900 from the loan into, so the person takes out a loan, used the loan to pay for something, gave the store money. Now it's this person's responsibility to pay Bank A back. The store deposits the money into the bank. What does the bank have to do with the deposit? The bank must now put 10% of 900, you're still operating with 10%. Must put 10% of 900 into required reserves. I hope that's 90. And now the remaining 810 could go into excess reserves. What could the bank do with that $810? They could loan it. So someone comes to this bank, to Bank B, for a loan, says, "Can I borrow money?" After a solid credit check, the bank says, "Indeed," and now the bank turns that excess reserve of $810 into a loan. And then loan it to this person. What does that person do? That person uses the $810 towards a purchase, and gives $810 to a store to buy something. Now it's this person's responsibility to pay Bank B back that loan. What does the store do? The store has a demand deposit in Bank C. And now, Bank C deposits, the business deposits $810 in Bank C that it got from this person. And now what does the bank do? The bank first takes 10% of that $810 and must put $81 into required reserves, and now the remaining $719, I think, Yes, we're going to say confidently, and the remaining $719 now is excess reserves. What could the bank do with that $719? The bank, if they choose to, if someone comes to the bank and says, hey, I need a loan, do you have money? The bank says, indeed. And they can turn that $719 of excess reserves into a loan and give it to this person. So now this person took out the loan for $719. After the bank turned those excess reserves, those potential loanable funds, from excess reserves into loanable funds, $719, gave it to this person, and then this person is going to go to another business, and so on and so forth. So this is the money multiplier. So that initial $1,000 deposit created an additional, just immediately, as this example could keep going, but so far, this initial $1,000 created an additional $900, and then an additional $810. So this initial $1,000, so now just from going up to Bank C, that initial $1,000 deposit, taking that $1,000 from like M1 cash, turning it into, keeping it as M1, but putting it from M1 cash into M1 checking, so it's still the same M1, but that $1,000 now became $1,900, and then $2,710, and so that initial $1,000 now increased the money supply to $2,710. Money literally was created from that initial deposit. So that is the money multiplier. So from the money multiplier, so if we were to keep going with this example from A to B to C, all the ways down, we would say that, and if we kept going, and we use 10%, so we have 1 divided by 0.1, times that by 10 over 10, to make it a real number, it's 10 divided by 1, 10. The money, if we kept going, in this example, we would say the money multiplier had a multiplication power of 10. 10 what? Well, there's several things we could do with the number 10. We take the money multiplier, so 10 times that by the excess reserves. Now be careful, here's the big trick for the AP test. You have to ask yourself, is this money based off a deposit? In which case, you have to account that the change in excess reserves is $900. Or was it based on an open market operation? Did the Federal Reserve buy a bond from that bank, and that bond became excess reserves? In that case, there is no reserve requirement when the Federal Reserve buys bonds or sells bonds to banks. So that goes directly to, that impacts excess reserves directly, open market operations. Versus a deposit, you have to account for the required reserve ratio. So be very careful what the question is asking. Is it asking, was the change initiated from a deposit, in which case you have to split that money up, or was it initiated by an open market operation, in which case you do not account for the required reserve ratio, and that directly impacts excess reserves. So we would take the money multiplier times change in excess reserves. So in this case it would be, if we go back to, so we do number 10, times, in this case we have to do account for the deposit, $900, if we went back to the original example. And if banks did this to the maximum, the total potential change to the money supply, or the total potential change to new loans created, be careful which the question is asking you, it's actually the same thing, would be $9,000. So if we kept this example going and kept it to the maximum, now in reality, the multiplier is actually around 3, because even though that it could be a potential of 10, banks, as we said before, do keep extra excess reserves on hand. They can't operate with zero excess reserves, because people are constantly, remember that demand deposits are a liability. So banks are always going to want to have extra cash on hand for emergencies. And the question will recognize that and say, well, what could the total potential change to the money supply be, or new loans created be? And then that would be, so the potential, if we kept going from A to B to C, all down the alphabet, the money supplied, new amount of money created, would actually be, that initial $1,000 deposit would actually create $9,000 in new money. Or the question might ask, what could the max change to total deposits be? In this case, you take the money multiplier times the actual deposit itself. And because this would be different, you would take the total deposit itself, because the total deposit would be a larger number because it includes the original deposit, and the money is being deposited and not just loans. So it includes more of the whole balance sheet. Whereas the first part, just the excess reserves, accounts for that money is being separated. So in this case, the money multiplier, 10 times $1,000, the total change in deposits would be $10,000. So this is the typical one you're going to see, money multiplier times the change in excess reserves. Be careful. Is it a deposit or is it an open market operation? Remember, open market operations go straight to excess reserves. Deposits are broken up, so our deposits, part of that goes to required reserve, whereas the open market operation goes directly to excess reserves. And that will give you the total potential change to money supply or new loans being created. And this is both the beautiful thing and integral thing, what Alexander Hamilton envisions when he wants a strong and stable banking system, that this is how this feeds investment spending, and this is how the banking system generates investment spending across an economy and will ultimately be able to increase, or in the reverse, if we sold bonds, to shrink an economy if they did a contractionary policy. But this is how the Federal Reserve and the banking system, and the Federal Reserve providing the stability in the banking system and the faith in the banking system to borrow money. This is the beautiful thing about how banks help an economy grow. And that initial $1,000 keeps going and going and going and generating all of these new potential loans. However, unfortunately, as we see also throughout history, it also could lead to the collapse of the banking system, because if these new loans, as we saw in 2007, are toxic loans and loans that can't be paid back, this is going to create a negative chain reaction. And that's why in 2007, many banks and famous banks in everyday vernacular, and big banks that don't exist anymore, are on the verge or just collapse because of how intertwined they are to each other. So this is, as I said, could be the potentially bad thing, but also the potentially great thing about the banking system, that deposits, just like in the circular flow model, one person's spending becomes another person's income, which becomes another person's spending. In the banking system, one person's deposit becomes another person's loan, which becomes a deposit, which becomes a loan. And that's why the Federal Reserve's power of open market operations is so powerful when it injects not just $1,000, but millions of dollars at a time into the banking system to immediately start correcting economic issues. Thank you for watching. Remember, whether it comes to your money, your mind, or your body, invest hard, invest often, and no feelings. Money never sleeps. We'll see you next time.